Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, as always. And boy, do I have a bunch of stars on the show this week. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But our topic is CES. We're a month away from what used to be the Consumer Electronics Show, but now they call it CES because they're kind of backing away from it just being consumer electronics that the Consumer Technology Association puts on. And I have, in the order on my screen, Deborah, Mark, and Avi. Deborah, why don't we start with you? Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and how many years you've been going to CES.
Oh, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of CoreSite Research. Started off my career as a Wall Street analyst. So that was when I first went to CES. So that was at least a decade ago. And then moved to Greater China, where I ran a think tank for the largest supply chain company. And then we spun out into CoreSite Research. And so we really look at the intersection of the consumer and really all things technology. And I can't get enough of CS. I mean, we get there early for with the analyst pass and we stay till the very end. I've been going probably for at least a decade. I think I got my 10-year pass a few years ago, so it's probably 13 or 14 at this point, but always my favorite way to start off the year. Helps us understand what the future looks like and also where we currently are.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mark, why don't you go next? You've been on the show before. Introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Mark Peterson. I am from Shen, Milsom and Wilkie. We are a technology consulting firm, and I run the audiovisual practice. And I've been attending as an analyst to CES for many years. I think it's not, I don't know if it's 10, but it's off and on, not every year. But the funny thing is, Deborah and I met each other, I think it was 3 years ago, at one, like, I think it was LG or Samsung. And I think we sat through 45 minutes of sustainability information. And I turned to her and I said, they haven't announced a product yet. I'm waiting. I got my clock going to see, are they actually going to make a product announcement? Because it was such a, what we talk about hype, right? And what's going on. So anyways, that's why I'm excited to be here with Deborah and with you, David and Avi. Thank you.
Thank you. And Avi, first time guest on the show as well. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody about Techsponential and what you do.
Thank you. I'm Avi Gringard. I'm an industry analyst with Techsponential. I've been an industry analyst for many years, covering consumer technology and platform trends. So I have been going to CES for a long time. I don't know if this is going to be my 25th, but it's certainly over 20. So this is a staple show for me.
Terrific, Avi. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. And let's chat about, first of all, let's talk about the logistics. I've been going to CES. Avi, I'm with you, Avi, more than 20, less than 30. I still hang around with people that wear the 35 plus badge, even though I don't necessarily believe them. I went every year they did a show. For the years that I've been going, I was one of the few people that went during the pandemic year in 2022 when
I was there too.
And that was a difficult year. Let's actually talk about that for a second. Not from the pandemic sense, we could spend hours on that, but we had a lot of tech journalists drop out of the show in the week or two beforehand, saying we got all the news anyway. We're covering it. We got our pre-briefings. I felt that was really a slap in the face to real technologists and people who follow the industry, because they were saying the quiet part out loud. They were saying they're getting all their information fed to them via these private briefings that don't happen at the show, and then they claim they're at the show breaking news when they had it 3 weeks ago. How much of a real event is this versus a farce and a show at this point? Anybody? What do you think?
Okay, I'll start. So that particular year was interesting because I was one of the few analysts to be on the show floor, and had some journalists ask me to cover it for them. And because there were so few people there, the vendors were all there. Not all the vendors, but most of the vendors were still there. It meant that you could actually cover the show in a different way. You could actually walk the show floor and see things. A typical CES is so crowded, both with vendors and with people, that almost by necessity, you have to get pre-briefed. You have to spend most of your time in offsite hotel rooms. I actually find the PepCom and Showstoppers events extremely helpful, particularly if you're looking for smaller companies, trends, and things and sort of discoveries, because you're just not going to be able to physically cover all of the acreage of this show.
Yeah, well, and we should actually explain that those are, for people who don't know, those are smaller press and analyst only events where you're not allowed to have a gargantuan booth and build up, a New World castle. Everybody's got the same size table, and it's about
Yep.
the people and the talking, and typically more samples and more realistic. But you're right, and we'll talk about the logistics too, because even now you have to have a strategy for covering the show, and my belief is one person can't do
Always.
it. But Deborah, what do you think? I mean, how much is reality versus theater?
I agree with Avi. Showstoppers, Pepcom. Last year I went to Covisa, which was interesting. It was across from Showstoppers. So since CES, which many of you may or may not know, is now the largest auto show. And I spent a lot of my time just by chance over with a lot of the kind of bigger equipment. I mean, I was looking at some of like the, autonomous excavators that were, kind of automated by LiDAR and whatnot last year. I feel like I go with a very set agenda. We do the press briefings and briefings before, like I have one this Friday morning from like 9 to 10:30. And that then gives us our roadmap, if you will, of the event. So I'm much more intentional about what do I know versus what do I not know yet. And I do feel I used to get, Avi, maybe 22 was the year I used to kind of go and I would have a plan and then I'd throw it out the window. I'm like, oh, but this shiny object and that shiny object. But since 22, where I think I mean, physically covered most of it, right? Because it was really easy to get around. I mean, it wasn't like, for those of you who go, right, you got the backpack and you're like the turtle, like bouncing off of each other. And so I now have a very set plan. I do get to go to almost everything. I usually go in a full day early, so I can also just map it out. But I think that you have to be very intentional. And, we'll go in. I actually lead the High Tech Retailing Summit. So I always go in with an eye to see what are we planning to say? Is that the right thing to say? Have things somehow changed since the beginning of the year? And oftentimes they have, right? Literally since like the end of 24 into 25, a lot of the talk tracks will change. And those are, I mean, that's what Mark and I talked about. I mean, that's why we had such a great conversation when we met each other, is that what you think is real does change quite rapidly, and so does investment. And following that is probably, to me, I mean, I leave there, I'm energized for the year. I kid you not. It is my favorite event. And I think it's about seeing, it's really searching for patterns. And you can leave there understanding where people are investing for the rest of 25. It is the best use of time you could spend all year long on the ground.
I love that concept of pattern searching because that echoes what I was thinking, but not quite the way I said it before. Mark, what about you? What are
Yeah,
your
that,
takeaways from
that
it?
concept, if you're trying to, find products that are real versus hype, and because all through CES, the times I've been there, the point of that show is to illustrate innovation in advance of actual productionized product and seeing where the trajectories are, seeing where the investments are, seeing where the risks and the challenges are. And so you coming in, as Deborah was saying, looking for me, it's been this situation where in the past the trends have influenced other areas, consumer influencing corporate, for example, big thing. And during the pandemic, I saw a different trajectory, which was all of the effort because of lack of product, all lack of
Supply
getting
chain.
product in. There was a reverse of that, where a lot of the technology that's developed on the commercial side was affecting consumer. And I think we're still seeing the ripple effect that with AI is an example of these products that are developed in other spaces impacting. And now I'm hoping to see this reverse effect of the consumerization bringing back in products into other areas. Now, during the pandemic, I was, just to give you an opposite point of view, I was at home. I took that one remote. Well, praise you, David, putting on the mask. And so I had this virtual experience. And I think that CES that year did a very good job of providing a virtual experience. I wrote a ton. It was the best reports I've ever done was on the show because I could sit at my computer the whole time and type and capture notes and capture images. But I was limited to the sessions, right? I was limited to these conversations. And I wasn't seeing from my own eyes. And so I think this is a trend that we're seeing throughout our industry and throughout, the way social media presents stuff is, are you seeing this unveiled through your own eyes, or are you getting it? And I would just want to say, Avi, on on some of these like showstoppers, I question now to what extent, because you have to be at those, right? Because there's too much to cover, you are dependent upon someone else's selectivity of what's the best and brightest. And in the past, I've trusted that. I want to actually question that, because who makes those decisions? Is it pay to play? Probably not. I don't know. But
Oh, it's absolutely pay to play.
Yeah,
Those
at
are,
those two shows it is.
Yeah. Yeah,
and,
you're buying your table.
but let's be fair. So is CES. You have to pay tens of thousands of dollars and more to have a booth at the show. Even the Eureka Park, which is an area devoted to startups, you still have to pay to be in that space. And although that is, just Mark, to your point, a great place to discover things that might have been under the radar. Those are often country-based pavilions where there'll be some funding from a country to have their startups be able to get some airtime, so to speak.
Right.
But
So
but I actually think I want to take that point. There's a lot of accelerators there too at Eureka Park. So that also gives you a much broader view in terms of some of the tech. And yes, so the accelerator is the one who's kind of sponsoring that. But I do think the most diverse tech you get is at Eureka Park, and certainly worth a half a day, if not a full day.
yeah, the problem is it takes you like a full day just to walk down one aisle, but you're bouncing. But anyway, all right. So now that I
I
have,
always do it on the last day for that very reason. It's the
Well, there
least
you
That's
fun.
smart. See, Avi,
Yeah.
I can learn from you. Thank you.
we'll talk about logistics if we get to it, because that's important to me. But I really want to cover, Mark, something that you brought up and ask you your opinion on this. I was having a conversation with some of the folks that are in the CTA research team going back, I think it'd be 6, 7 years ago, where I was saying, I'm upset as a hardware guy that this show is turning from a product show into a concept show, where you get these enormous booths, these huge pavilions from this manufacturer. And I said, okay, well, what are you selling? And the answer is nothing. They're selling an idea. They're there. And you know what? Maybe the show's gotten too big because we're putting ideas with products, or ideas, I don't know if that's a better thing. Obviously, from a trend standpoint, it's good to see what everybody's talking about, but the trends could just as easily be hype as reality. We talked about a few of them, on an email before the show. Where's the metaverse? Boy, was that a wrong turn. Or where my 5-second movie downloads on 5G that never happened. So we've made a lot of promises that you couldn't get your hands around. They're not tangible, and they turned out to be not real. So how much do we care about the concepts versus the products, Mark? And what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, you look at Rabbit AI. That's an example of one, right? Where it looked awesome, beautifully made product, right? Oh, I just touched a button, did I?
You can't make that up.
Yeah. And it's like, is this, so what do you think, Avi? Is that actually a real thing? Because, your Verge came out with nothing to see here.
It is real. I am holding it. It is a great, it's not a paperweight. It is a product that you can put on your desk when you're taking pictures of other products to add to the ambiance of the industrial design.
Industrial design, yeah. And then also we had Apple Vision Pro, right? Which was at the other side of this, sort of very impressive thing. He's going to pull this one up too. And then we had people buying that product, like senior, people who had cash, right? So you see, I saw leaders of companies saying this is going to shake the industry in terms of business applications. But after discomfort, after extended use, limited library, it starts like, so it started. So your question, David, about there is a certain blend of this, and I think obviously the big word of the year is AI and application of AI, right? And what the point of that concept around AI is, it's not a product, right? It's an engine, it's a fuel, right? So of course, what we're looking for is, how are people taking and using that fuel? How are they applying it? With the concepts around what's the risks, what's the familiarity? Am I going to adopt to this thing? Is it familiar? How does it affect my identity? We saw that with Apple coming up. This concept also with 5G, you can't have energy without the right, product to use it, right? So you have to line up the ability to bring products to space that can utilize the technology. They both have to be in sync. So we're looking for this timing of, I've got the ability to do this, I'm holding up a phone, and I've got the engine to be able to run the fuel. So those are really critical. And of course, the power impact. How does it affect me? Does it empower me? So that'll affect the adoption. And that's what I kind of use to see where these products are actually at. So we're still at familiarity, or we're not talking to AI. But this is why I say right now it's trend-based versus reality-based. And of course, we're seeing this drip down in AI in terms of, is it real? Is it not really? You're seeing these ebbs and flows of advancement and skepticism and advancement, which will continue. So that's what I think is really behind my concept around, is this a real product, or is this something that we're looking at the future and the trend?
Okay. All right. And as a host, I get to put in my two cents that I think VR is never going to happen other than industrial applications. The sooner we realize the sooner we realize that, the better.
I'll disagree.
That I know that's fine.
I strongly
but,
disagree.
If a deadly pandemic can't get people to put on glasses they don't normally wear, nothing will. But that was one of them. And go ahead. Let's go, Deborah. Your thoughts on that versus concepts versus products versus anything else I threw at you.
Well, that goes back to why, people, I just want to make sure when we go into CES, right, we have kind of our thoughts on what's real and what's not, but you really can, test the waters. And because you get to see so many different companies that honestly do the same thing, by the end, you're like, this is real. There's something here, or we're just going to POC our way through it. And I do think that, Mark, you bring up an incredibly important point. And we hosted a large event last night called Legends of Commerce. And what we saw from retailers, brands, technology companies, many of the solutions right now in AI are still in POC, and they're having a very difficult time kind of getting deployed. And that, I think, is where we're at. And so maybe when we're all there in January, we'll start to see some changes. And it's not about budget, right? People have budget. It's about, I think, at this point, almost like a risk tolerance thing, right? They've got the energy. They understand I remember the first time I spent time with Andrew Ng, right? He was like, this whole idea of like oil, AI is the new oil. And so I think we have all the components. It's just a matter of risk tolerance, I think, right now, from what we're seeing. I don't know. Avi, what do you think?
So on AI, I mean, it's a technology. So like all technologies, it's a question of how it gets implemented. And we're definitely going to see a lot of that. I suspect that if you use AI as a drinking game at CES press conferences, you'll have cirrhosis of the liver before the end of the day. So there's definitely going to be, I believe, in our pre-show, hey, what are we going to talk about? Is it going to be AI washing, or are we going to see true, massive innovation at CES? And I think that's the wrong thing to try to get out of CES. CES in general, for me, is not about seeing new products that blow you away. Although sometimes you get micro LED displays that do blow you away, and sometimes there are, particularly on the display side, where the retail cycle is almost exactly a year, and so you're trying to get something out. You talk about it, show it off at CES, you start manufacturing it, you get it out in the summer and fall, and there you go.
And then your spouse or friends say, "Oh, look at this cool new thing in the store," and you say, "Oh, that's not new. I saw it a year ago."
Yep. But we also see new products based around new silicon platforms. So Intel and AMD and Qualcomm all have new chips coming out, some of which have been announced, some of which will be announced at CES. And then you'll get a whole suite of laptops based on, or in some cases, gaming PCs based on that. But overall, I would say that what you really see at CES is ecosystem. And you see trends. And so when you're walking around and you see because it's a backwards looking thing, as much as we like to think that CES shows you what the next thing is going to be. No, the next thing that Apple announces is going to be at an Apple event. The next thing that Samsung announces, even though they have an enormous press conference and a huge booth.
City, its own zip code.
The big thing that Samsung unboxes is that their Unpacked events. So these, some of the leaders in the consumer, particularly in the consumer tech space, have their own events, and they do their own thing where they can focus all the press attention on that product right before it comes out, or in some cases, right before they're getting developers the ability to write for those products, which is why there was such a long lead time on something like an Apple Vision Pro, because it's a developer toy right now. It's not really a consumer ready product. Not that you can't go and buy one and get a good consumer experience out of it if you have a specific use case in mind, like specific types of entertainment. But what you do see is, where's everybody, and I do mean everybody, where's everybody putting their efforts? What trends are they building around? I mean, if you went back to CES 15 years ago, there were miles, and I really do mean miles, of smartphone cases. It's not that you can't find smartphone cases at CES anymore, but it's not a big deal. This isn't where you go to find a
I missed the
smartphone.
little flashy lights they used to attach to the antennas on the
But
smartphone.
the whole point was that it was clear that the mobile phone business was where the ecosystem had gone. That's where the big trends. And so and from there you saw, and there were actual phones launched at CES in those years. There generally aren't now. But so I think that's exactly what you should be looking for. And that's where I make the determination between, is this an idea? And that's not a bad thing if it's an idea. If it's an idea that you're putting money behind because you're building products around it, or you're jumping onto that trend. Now, sometimes the trends are fads like 3D TV, but sometimes the
That goes
trends.
back to my glasses comment, by the way. But go on.
But and I think this year at CES we will see some really intriguing glasses that take sort of baby steps rather than asking you to stick a helmet on your head. And we already have it. I could pull it out if I want, from Meta with their Ray-Ban smart glasses. Essilor Luxottica is always at CES nowadays.
Well, I
Um,
loved
yeah,
Luxottica's product last year for the hearing assistance, but as far as I understand, that's not yet available in the US. That's only been
the
approved in Europe
partnership
so
now
far.
And
with
David,
Meta on that.
I want to jump into that because I
Okay.
think I appreciate Avi's comments, but I also think that, since, let's call it 2020, right? The diversity of who's at CES has changed, right? Last year there were certain countries where it was difficult to get visas. And so I don't like, one of my challenges is that we don't really get a global view anymore. And that I think is a challenge because, for all of us who've been going for so many years, right? I think you still go in with the mindset that you do, but you realize sometimes, like, you'll be walking around, you're like, oh, I used to see this booth here, but they're not here anymore. And so I
Yep.
do think that that's, David, in some of your opening remarks, like, what's changed at CS is it's not truly global anymore. And it's not that CS can control that. It's just not what it used to be because of some of the challenges that exist.
But health technology, I think, is global, right? And I think that shows to me this, it's not just the, if you talk about AI and the fuel for AI, it's what product space has currency now, has value now, that can continue to create trajectory and value. So whether they have a little bit of this or more later, it's certainly a buy-in. And I think that's where I'm looking at a lot of the innovation and space. And plus, we got older generations, right? We got older people, and we've got it's not just physical health tech, it's mental health tech and output of a lot of the stress that we've had over the years, and how to sleep better and mindset. So all that space, to me, I'm excited about it because I don't know a lot about these innovations. I've come from audio, video technology, in your face stuff, but I think we went through this wearable kind of space with, knowing and your fitness markers and stuff like that. And it's not just the health tech. Maybe I'm thinking, Deborah, how we talked about how it came in a car show, right? Where, you saw John Deere tractors that were 15 feet high that had no driver, right? The driver was in a small room around the corner. And I'm thinking also in health tech, it's not just what consumer wears, but some of the innovations and some of the acquisitions that we're seeing, like Johnson & Johnson, buying companies that make products for heart monitoring and heart care, are showing us that this industry can go deep into medical and lighter in terms of wearables and consumer. So I'm really excited about that space and what may be announced there.
Can I ask you guys what, like last year, what was kind of different than you expected? And I'll tell you, I ended up doing an interview for the NASDAQ over in the West Hall, and that's actually where all that like huge right capital equipment was. And I didn't plan to spend the day there. I was so just going back to like there's like these huge excavators and these, you know, huge tractors and whatnot. And I just never so but first of all, I was like, oh, Avi, if you want to know where to go where it's empty, it was like not that crowded.
Yeah, it got more. It depended on which day you went. And it depended on who was giving out hats because the caterpillar, the cat booth was giving out hats, and you couldn't get anywhere near them.
But that was like just so interesting. Like,
WebEx
oh,
one,
okay, you cannot make this stuff up, you guys.
that's my WebEx One hat from a Cisco conference. Thank you.
I mean, I got a hat because I came a day later and I had a private one-on-one with those guys. But I don't have that. I can't pull that out as a prop.
Well, you pulled out everything else as a prop, Avi. You got
Sorry, I didn't prep.
Okay.
I
didn't know that this would be relevant. Okay.
Okay, no problem. The when I first started going to CES, and I don't even want to quote the year, you would always stay at the Las Vegas Hilton because that was the only hotel next to the convention, the only convention center. All that's changed. But you'd walk through the North Hall where all the loud cars would be, and you'd have all the models signing partially nude pictures of themselves. And because that's what the show was in the North Hall, that's gone. A lot of the gitch is gone. A lot of the giveaways are gone. Avi, you know, you still on the I rate list, meaning I rate. So you get all the stuff automatically anyway, because people want your opinion of it. But you know, you can walk through the hall and say, "Oh, that's a great pair of headphones. Can I get one?" They say, "Yeah, it's at Walmart for $30." So I mean, again, Pepcom is a little different and Showstopper is a little different, but you're not seeing. So that's one of the big changes over the years. To answer your question, Deborah, and I guess we've talked about AI, we've talked about the explosion of health tech, both good and bad and real and fake. What are the other themes that you guys are expecting to see come out of the show this year? Anything you can, and we'll get back together again in January and talk about where we were right and where we were wrong. But what do you think? What do you think we're going to hear about this year?
All right,
I
so
was
go
just at
ahead.
the Qualcomm analyst meeting, and to me, right, I mean, what's happening on the laptop side, not only the AI laptops, the price, and I mean, they're available now. I mean, this is the thing going back to, it's not 9, 12 months. And their analyst meeting was just 2 weeks ago. The other thing I thought, this whole idea around like the industrial internet and what's happening in supply chain, that, right, IoT, and just like the power that's available, going back to Mark's point earlier, you know, it's, and these things are being developed, I think, Avi, much faster than they used to be. So it's not that like you hear about it, you know, it's in some like glass case and it's rolled out 12 months later. It feels not 100%, but in many cases we're seeing things presented and then available for sale much faster. So I think that we're hearing a lot more about supply chain. That has been an interesting aspect of all this. I think secondly, in terms of like development time, prices are actually much, like there's a much greater focus on like where you can kind of, you know, bring out things from a price perspective. And I feel like going back to the comments around a lot of these acquisitions that Mark made, right? We're seeing a lot of these companies kind of ebb and flow in ways that we maybe didn't expect because of the acquisition activity. So I think that it's going to be very, like last year, it still felt very much very early AI, a lot of focus on cars. I think that the turn, like to me, I think we're going to see a lot around supply chain, and I think we're going to see more around practical tech. And that to me is a change. Fewer bells and whistles and more around like what can you do today?
Okay.
Okay, so I was going to talk on a couple of things. First was, you know, David, you and I, we typically go to that for early show where there's somebody talking about the trends, right? The trends,
Right.
And
Usually Steve or someone on his
yeah.
team.
And weren't they there telling us that, you know, 5G was the golden highway, right? And 5G was going to make everything perfect and smart, faster downloads in a second. And it's like, well, wait, hang on a minute. They didn't quite have, but now T-Mobile just acquired US Cellular, right, for 4.4 billion. So maybe there's something, not this year, maybe there's something that's going to happen there, but it doesn't have that kind of drive in, you know, as a thematic, oh, by the way, ho hum, right? Sustainability, which was super important to these companies, you know, because of it, of their image and how is a reflection of their business model, even from the larger companies, and brand awareness, right, and sustainability. I've seen that been impacted, and it kind of shows that politics, geopolitics, inflation, pricing,
Tariffs.
it's just it's vulnerable, right? It's vulnerable to future setbacks. If it's vulnerable to setbacks now, it's vulnerable to future setbacks. It needs to have more value proposition. It needs to either affect our health or affect our risk prices somewhere along the line. There needs to be a bite with sustainability to really make it consumable as of, I want that, right? And I do think health, and you know, food, what the food we eat, and the stuff we do is going to be important. I think that lining up with sustainability is going to be important. Streaming and cutting the cord is another big theme, right? Because I think that we've had a lot of confusion. This past year has been two things. First, the news on television news, as we know, has been really criticized, right, in terms of viewership and trust. And so we all cut the cord, and we're on the whole, but we have so many choices and none of them good. They all suck, right? There's confusion over plans and services. It's a free for all. And now we got commercials back in. I thought I got off commercials.
Yes, cord cutting is gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
So, all right, maybe that's not a product.
Same experience costs more.
It may not be a product, but it's certainly been creating a lot of churn and hopefully opportunities for something to come out of that, other than Apple TV, which is kind of riding on top of that one. So I think that's an important one. I think the last one, Avi, over to you, was that, you know, NVIDIA being overpriced, but not yet overhyped, because they're the only game in town. I think we're going to see the chips come up back to them, right? We're going to see more competition in those GPUs and having more products, but not this year. This is still, you know, development cycle, right?
Yeah, it's also probably not the right place for them. You're gonna, you know, you want to see a giant chip that's designed for AI. You're going to go to AWS Ignite. You're not going to go to CES.
Yeah, there are a couple of people I was going to invite to the show that are at AWS right now. So, you know, you guys are the losers. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, just to answer your original question, David, I think that we're going to see a lot around consumer IoT this year, where Matter is finally starting to matter. It's the excitement of creating a standard, the disappointment of, oh my God, the standard doesn't cover half the things, and is impossible to implement. And well, not impossible, it is difficult to implement and cross-test against everything, and backwards incompatibility. And now we're starting to go up the curve of people are actually adopting this. And hopefully we will see, you know, I think even at this particular show, we will see hubs and products designed to work together across, you know, what used to be different ecosystems. Brand specific ecosystems will now work with Matter and Threads. And so that, I think that we're going to see that is a major trend. Deborah, I think you had a really good point there that China is now a completely separate market. It has been in phones for a while, but now in electric vehicles. And as CES is definitely an auto show, that, you know, you are seeing only a fragment of the total market. Yeah, no, West Hall is still going to be full of giant agribusiness and automotive. The silicon vendors from Qualcomm to MediaTek to NVIDIA are all targeting automobiles. They all love this show to show off, you know, even better than a dedicated auto show. It's a tech show, so they can show off their tech. And you have, you know, companies like John Deere, which is really just AI on wheels, that, you know, they're a tech company, and they've had for the last, I want to say 4 years, maybe 5, they've had big press conferences at CES, showing off the fact that they're a tech company that works in agriculture, not an agriculture tech company that's attaching some tech.
Yep.
Yeah, not to overdo the John Deere thing, but I think that, Avi, to your point, you're seeing some of these companies that are also helping you better understand the market because, they're talking about bigger trends. And this goes back to David, some of, what you don't necessarily expect. I think it's important for the audience, what you don't expect to get out of CS, right? Who knew about like aging farmers, who knew that there were challenges getting help on fields, who knew about, kind of the rate of accidents and whatnot, and, the impact that John Deere is having on, U.S. agriculture, right, is significant. But if we hadn't gone to the press conferences, we wouldn't have known all these things that are actually not only important in terms of our personal lives, but professional as well.
All right, so you're talking about press conferences. That lets me segue the conversation just a little bit to logistics. I
Hmm.
would say probably about 15 years ago is when I came to the conclusion that even though I go to CES every year, I can't see the show. It's physically impossible for one human being over the course of a week to see every bit of the show. So you've got two choices. You can go with a big team and assign pieces and get together at the end of the day and swap notes, or you can pick and choose what you're going to do and just shrug that you missed the other things. And there have been years that I missed, the chip on the contact lens and other things that I was standing right there, but I didn't have. So from a logistics standpoint, one of my most important rules, if you're going, is don't be on buses and taxis and cars. Pick a place to be during
Yeah.
the day and
Yep.
be there. And if somebody says, "Oh, well, I have an appointment for you here that day and it's the only one available," you say, "Sorry, that day I'm in this building. Happy to
Yep.
meet with you then. I'm in your building on this day." So, I probably do the convention center, the old LVCC first, just because I'm a traditionalist, and go to the Venetian next, and then do some of the pickups on the third day. But that's one of the key things. I'm also starting to sour a little bit on the press conferences because I get there early for press days, and whether you get special invitations to some or have to stand online for others, you're also getting a curated experience that's not very good. You're missing three of the conferences while you're waiting to get into a fourth one. And you can probably, in most cases, sit back in your hotel room and just watch it on stream and capture videos and be quicker to get information out with it. So I'm not sure how long the press days are going to even exist, even though I still make Mandalay Bay my home base. What do you guys agree with those? What are the strategies that you follow?
Well, I wanted to
All right.
mention, David, that there's a part about being there, just the concept of being there, right? When whether you're, I think that's the thing is your identity and association with the technology, with the show sometimes has more value. So thousands of people there just for the sake of saying I'm at the show, whether they actually saw the product that you're referring to and get close enough because of the jam booths. That may be secondary to the first part, which I think has created such a difficult ability to access it. I think this is probably, unless there's something different. Last year, I'm going to be at the media events because I agree with you that it has less of a value of and a waste of time sitting and waiting, not even to get into the room, but just to wait in line. And something like Panasonic, it's just like, no, there's
No, the Panasonic, they jumped the shark when they did the Stormtroopers for me. I know other people love
right.
that.
There you go.
That is not what I came to that for. I could very easily go to Disney and see that. I
Yeah.
came to get information. It was a waste of my time. LG, which does a great job every year, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's like,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
And
I have to
yeah.
work on that.
Hyundai, I think, was an example. I think you kind of mentioned some of these companies are tech companies that actually they make products, but they're in a much larger universe. And some of the awareness of hydrogen cells and hydrogen, services gives me more awareness that this isn't just a consumer, space, but it has larger impact. Lucci, I get out of those first couple of days. I don't see it during the show, but I'm over to you guys. Over to you, Deborah. What do you think? What's your strategy?
I mean, I usually do two locations in one day. And I start super early. I think that's the biggest thing is, you're out and about at 7 a.m., right? You've got your coffee, you're ready to go. And you don't deviate from your plan, right? Like in the years past where I like look back and I'm like, oh, that was a mistake, is when I have a plan and all of a sudden, going back to David's point, it's like, oh, I can be over here. I'm like, oh, let me do that. So I think that like usually like I feel like around 3 o'clock, I just need to like change physical space. And it's interesting, Dave, what you bring up. I walk. So that's been my big change because you can get almost anywhere in about 30 minutes on your 2 feet. But if you end up in a bus, a taxi, etc., you can get stuck in traffic and you can lose quite a bit of time. And so I walk a lot of it. And I mean, I'm doing like 36,000 steps a day while I'm there. So hydration is key, right? Making sure you've got like a bar in your bag. I mean, I'm talking very practical things, but they do add up
Yeah.
because if you don't need to sit down and eat for an hour and you can like be walking between meetings and like eating a bar and drinking some water, you can save a huge amount of time. So you're out there at 7 and you're done at, let's say, 9, you can probably pack, and you're really strategic. You can pack 2 or 3 days into one.
You're done at 9? Whew, good.
I mean,
You
it's
don't have as many evening events as I do.
well, I gotta go. I'm like typing up stuff at night to start the next day. So I think it goes back to, and we've got a team that's there. So we've got people who are also starting later, and that way we can stage it as well. So some people are going to start at noon and end at midnight. But I think having a strategy and sticking to it, I think is critical, and not changing the plan once you go in, because that always is a mistake. What can I ask the crowd? And I mean, we've still got to hear from you, but like, where do you home base? What are some of the other, like, there's got to be kind of tips and tricks. How do you kind of like schedule things? Like I said, for me, it was like the bring your water, bring a bar, and walk. But like, you guys have to have some other great tips too.
All right, I'll jump in here. I was going to say some of this anyway. First of all, you should keep in mind that the Venetian and the Wynn are next door to each other. And so if for me, I do a lot of hotel suite meetings at CES, in part because my business model, just in general at Texponential, is monetizing conversations, not report writing. So I need to meet with the executives to justify my existence. But you can actually schedule a meeting at Wynn Tower Suites and the Venetian Tower Suites with only 15 to 20 minutes in between them, because you can actually get there by just crossing the street and walking over to the wedding entrance in at the Wynn. So that's one tip. If there were years where I rented a car and would park in the Venetian because the Venetian has free parking. Not only that, they have valet parking, because if you don't use the valet parking, the place gets parked up. So you can do that. The challenge with having a car is that if you do that on the way out, you cannot leave around 4, 5, or 6 o'clock because you will be stuck in the parking lot trying to get out for 2 hours.
But that's actually one of the tips, and I'll come right back to you, Avi. But if you are going to drive, which actually isn't a bad idea if you do evening events,
Yep.
park where you need your car to be.
Yep.
And then taxi or
And Uber,
Lyft or something across.
Uber actually has worked reasonably well. I also keep strictly kosher, and there is kosher food in Vegas, but it's out where the Jews actually live, and so that has meant that just so that I don't starve to death, I will buy like bagels with preservatives and make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and keep them on me, and then I don't have to stop for lunch. And that's, so, and I've told that to other people and they're like, wow, that's so much healthier than the random stuff I'm grabbing at a press conference off the table. So I'll eat fruit off of the tables, and then have my carbs with me, along with healthy snacks like Kind bars. And yes, it's a desert and the hotels AC is really dry. So absolutely you want to drink lots and lots of water. If you can stay right near the Venetian, there's the other trick is that the Venetian itself is enormously expensive and sells out. But you can stay at the Link, for example. It's a terrible hotel, but it's right next to the Venetian and you can walk there. It's not where I'm staying this year, but you can walk to the Venetian. And then from the Venetian, the shuttle that goes directly from the Venetian to the LVCC actually is pretty quick. It doesn't get stuck in much traffic. There isn't, I mean, yeah, it can. And if you're, and I would always leave an hour between a meeting at the Venetian and the LVCC. But that is, but going back to it, yeah, I have a Venetian day, just like David said. I have an LVCC day. Um, and yeah, I do go to the press conferences, David, just because it's so crowded. That doesn't mean no one is going to be there. Um, that's like, the restaurant that's, so crowded that nobody goes. Um,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
there's something to be said, but you're absolutely right. You can't, sometimes the press conferences overlap. Sometimes in order to get into the press conference means you're effectively not going to a different one. Um, yeah, I am not The Verge. I don't have trailers full of journalists who can cover everything. So pick and choose. In my case, clients come first, trends come second. So sometimes I will meet with random small companies that say, hey, we've got some new storage thing that we'd like you to take a look at, or we have some new battery technology we'd like you to take a look at, or we're a startup XR and we've got new display micro displays that go in glasses. Try to pepper enough of those in so that you get a sense of what's cool, or what might be put into a product at next year's CES, and hope for the best.
Yeah, well, I agree with all the points you guys made. The only thing I would add to any of that is, if you can, and if you don't know of any, let me know. I'll give you a list. Try and stay at a hotel that's actually got coffee makers in the room. And the first trip that I make when I get into Las Vegas after I pick up a rental car is over to a supermarket or the Walmart. And I get a case of water for what it costs to get a bottle in the hotel. And I get, a couple of protein bars and breakfast bars and some things that I can have in the room. And unless I'm having a business meeting, I don't do breakfast in Las Vegas. The days of enjoying that bacon in the morning are over. I can't do that. So I'm with you there, Avi. No more pork.
Yep. There's a Target on the strip too, and they sell products at the same roughly price you would get at a Target and out, in the
Yeah.
suburbs.
So that's a
Pick
good
up
tip is
coffee
to
and
is
stuff.
to buy your stuff and bring it up to your room. And the other tip, it depends on how heavy you like to travel or light you have to travel, is I have a K-cup coffee maker that I bought for like $30 that I can travel with. So again, breakfasts are not an issue, and we're mostly getting fed if you work it out correctly for lunch and dinner as media and press at all the events. So again, other than business meetings, that's the only other tip that I would have.
I want,
And remember,
one,
everything takes longer.
wanted to shift over to more of trends and finish this one, but I wanted to point out, be careful when you do the valet alley, Avi, because last 2 years ago, first carjacking I saw at the valet. Someone came right next to me, looked like walking out the hotel, and then turned right into the car and jacked the car with the person who was valeting the car. So keep your eyes open when you're handing over the keys. But
I mean, I used to rent a car every single year, partly because again, I wanted to drive out to where the kosher food was. But that was in the days when when the casino parking was free. So now you're not just paying inflated rates for a car, you're also paying inflated rates for parking. And again, if you're, an analyst or a journalist, you might be going to 5 different hotels in an evening, and the parking fees, it just,
Well, you can open a credit card with either the Caesars chain or the MGM chain and get free parking on a free credit card. So again, these are all the
there you go.
strategies if you're in Vegas more than once a year. All right, so
Oh, and the what used to be the Hilton, which is now I think the Westgate.
Westgate.
Yeah, if you stay there, you get in and out privileges in their parking garage, and
Right.
that is the way. If your home base is the LVCC, mine tends to be the Venetian these days. But back in the days when it was, if you were spending a lot of your time in the LVCC, staying in that hotel, not a great hotel, will get you some really useful in and out parking privileges.
All right, so we have to wrap up this conversation. I'm going to ask each of you one at a time for last thoughts. But Mark, I'm going to ask you personally to answer a question that I always get asked from our AV community, which is why should this be important to folks that are in AV and collaboration? Why is this a big show? And I always make that answer, but what would you say? How do you answer? Why is this important to you? And what are your last thoughts?
well, previously, was about a lot of driven by display technology, and as we saw, consumer demand and consumer products innovation would flow into. If I can do it at home, I should be able to do it at work, and this leads So one of the things that I've been very much focused on is the adoption of AI in the workplace from the consumer side. If I can talk to my device and interact with my device and have a conversation with my own, bring your own intelligence, right? So this is not Microsoft's Copilot. This is whatever my intelligence is. I want to be able to bring this in. I think this is an important part of changing the perspective from this downflow from the enterprise, where you're hearing and being pushed value from Zoom or from Microsoft, versus uprising from the consumer products and what people can do at home and what executives expect to be able to do in the office.
Good point. Deborah, what's your takeaway? What are you most looking forward to at the show this year, or what your expectations are?
No, I will say this conversation helped me really crystallize in some ways what I really do get out of it. So we are financial analysts. So we attend all of those meetings, right? We'll have all of the numbers and whatnot before CES, which is more about industry analysts. So it's very interesting to see how that's translated between the two and if those stories are consistent. So I would say that we probably, going back to patterns and kind of, looking around the corner, we're trying to see if what these companies said from a financial analyst perspective is also what they're saying from an industry analyst perspective, because that's where you're seeing a lot more of the press pickup. And what has been said in 24 that they're actually going to do in 25, and where are the gaps. And so I think we're kind of holding companies accountable to what they said that they were going to do, and is that what they're still saying that they are going to do. And that's why we do attend the press conferences. I used to actually go to like some of them twice, right? They would have it for the media days, and then they'd have it, these days we go to them early, and then the rest of the show, going back to Avi's point, we're setting up meetings, so everything is planned. Because if you go without a journey, your destination is definitely not one that is well decided. So I think it's going with a plan and see if what you thought, and I think write it down, type it up, whatever. But I actually think it's really important to have everything written down so you can go back to it after the show where your head is just filling with ideas, to see if what you thought you're going to get out of it is what you did, and if what you thought the companies were going to say was consistent, because there are a lot of inconsistencies, and that to me is the real value.
Okay. Avi, your last words on that one?
Thank you. So CES for me is one of the big events, along with Mobile World Congress, and some specific vendor events, and silicon vendor events, which drive a lot of the conversation. But I really feel like when I'm walking down the aisle in a casino hotel with 5 million people, and every once in a while somebody spots me and like, oh, do we need to show you this? I really feel like there's a voice of David Attenborough over doing a voiceover saying, an analyst in his natural habitat, a trade show. So this is, you're always going to miss something. Hopefully you, I do try to stick to the plan, Deborah, but there usually try to find something serendipitous. You get pulled in one direction or another. Sometimes it's just seeing friends, and other analysts, PR friends, PR people can be your friends. And seeing the products, seeing how products have evolved, chalking up the trends, and then one last tip is, if you can get away with it. I used to try to write multiple reports a day. Then I tried to write one wrap-up report per night. I often will now just do a lot of social media and then do a wrap-up report a week or two later. And again, with the value being, I gave you the advice when we had our meeting, and we could wrap it all up some other time. There's no possible way to do breakfast meetings and dinner meetings and evening events, and then after party evening events, and then after party evening events, only to do a breakfast meeting. When are you writing? I don't understand that. I can't do that anymore. I'm too old.
Okay. All right. So last 10 seconds each. Avi, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it?
Go to texponential.com. You'll see all my contact information there. I'm on all the social platforms.
Deborah, same question.
Deborah Weinswig at coresight.com. You can go to coresight.com as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn and also on X.
Terrific. Mark?
Most of my material comes through my company, so smnwllc.com or Shen, Milsom, and Wilkie. So we post a lot of the articles and insights there.
Okay, terrific. I hope to see the three of you at CES. I would say let's do it at PepCom and do this in person for a minute or two, but honestly, the show won't have opened yet. So we should probably, if you're all at Showstoppers, do it Showstoppers, at least after the
Showstoppers, yeah.
first day, to say, what did we see? And we'll all stand there with a drink in our hands.
Drones.
And
Lots of drones.
I'll grab Dave Leon over and he can, give us a blessing from there. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for watching. We really do appreciate it. We will see you on next week's show. Take care.